Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Amateur Hour podcast. My name is Jacob and I have Deshaun joining me today, and we kind of just got into a bit of a debate, which it kind of spawned naturally. We argued about if we think the Raptors will ever win another NBA championship in our lifetimes. And as 20-year-olds, we're kind of basing it, well I'm 20, Deshaun's 21, we're basing it off another 60 years. So the question is, will the Raptors win an NBA championship in the next 60 years? And I am pretty adamant that somehow in the next 60 years, they will have a team good enough to win an NBA championship. Whereas Deshaun thinks that the Raptors will never win an NBA championship. After last season's triumph, we were kind of discussing if they'd be able to repeat at some point, anytime in the future, and Deshaun seems to think they will not. Do you mind explaining why you think in 60 years, when there are 60 NBA championships to be crowned, the Raptors will not get one of those next 60?
In the past 25 years, the Raptors luckily got one of those NBA championships. And I say luckily, and I'm a huge Raptors fan, and I absolutely love them to death, but we got extremely lucky when it came to Joel Embiid's health and just barely beating the 76ers, and then everyone on Golden State basically being hurt and not performing to the best of their abilities. When it comes down to it for Toronto, I think their lack of ability to attract free agents is going to affect them. Being up here in Canada, American players, it's not really a destination where they see themselves, having, their career.
What about Canadian players?
I think your Canadian players aren't at the level yet where they can take you to a championship.
You don't think any time in the next 60 years there's going to be good Canadian players in the NBA? You don't think there's ever going to be a Canadian superstar again? So Steve Nash being the one I'm thinking of. You don't think there's ever going to be another superstar Canadian player?
The thing is, and like you say Steve Nash, how many championships did Steve Nash ever win?
Well, you could say that a lot. You can say that about a lot of players.
No, you can. But
there's a lot of Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Famers who don't have rings.
Because you're telling me a Canadian player is going to carry you to a championship, and you have this guy who you're saying.
So you think it's Steve Nash's fault? You think it's not Steve Nash's fault?
It's not. It's where he played, and the fact that he couldn't, elevate his team as the best player in his team to, beyond the teams that he was facing. And it's not really his fault because, you have KG's Timberwolves there. You have Kobe's Lakers. You have the Spurs. Like, there were very, very good teams. There was Dallas as well in there. But I just don't think, the NBA is so competitive. And who's to say that in the next 60 years, Toronto's even, is able to get any of those Canadian superstars?
Look, I don't even think
what if
those
Canadian superstars end up in Denver, end up in Minnesota, end up in LA, end up anywhere else, and it's a nicer place to play. It's always nice to play in your hometown, but I don't think it happens.
Every NBA team fills out their roster. I don't even think it's a case of just Canadian players, by the way, because you were just making the argument that American players don't want to come to Canada. But there's going to be Canadian players who do want to come to Canada. And Canadian basketball is exponentially getting more popular. Right now, there's more Canadian players in the NBA than there's ever been before. The second most prominent country in the NBA is Canada right now. By numbers.
How many Canadian players are there in the NBA? 15? Maybe.
The Canadian player, the amount of players playing the NBA from Canada is more than ever before, and
I understand that, but I'm saying
year.
How many are there? I'm not.
I think it's around 15. But Canadian basketball has in the last 5 years started to get. Started to take off.
Which one of those Canadian players are superstars?
I think Andrew Wiggins on a course
to be a superstar.
To be a star. I think RJ Barrett has the ability to be a superstar. Now that I think he'll get to that level, I think he'll be a star in the NBA.
Disagree.
And the up-and-coming amount of Canadians playing basketball is more than ever before.
You're
this
saying...
isn't even part of the argument. We're talking about the Raptors.
I agree, but you're trying to tell me...
The market for the Raptors is getting bigger every year as well. For considering where they started, barely selling any tickets in 95, they have gotten better every year. And it's gone significantly the market in Toronto basketball has gone significantly better this decade, especially in the last 5 years. And it took a humongous jump after last season when they won an NBA championship. The Toronto market is continuously growing. Toronto is one of the biggest, Toronto as a city is one of the biggest markets in the world. Never mind, we're just talking about NBA. Toronto as a city is one of the biggest markets in the world. And that is irrefutable.
It's not to American players, and you know that. And tell me,
you don't think in the next 60 years Toronto's going to be a market in the NBA?
That NBA players want to go to. No. Do you see how NBA players who literally will win awards in Toronto talk about their experience here? They literally say, like, Drozen when he was drafted was like, fuck, like, I gotta go to Canada. I don't even have a passport. Like who the fuck wants to, like, that's the guy who literally
Are there any players that play in Toronto that don't like Toronto? Do you know any players that don't like Toronto when they play in Toronto?
I think you have to understand what really happens is a lot of guys, especially when they get traded here, they think, oh, you know, Kawhi was never supposed to get traded here. Kawhi was traded here because the Spurs just didn't want to trade him to where he wanted to go to. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So they're like, you know, what's the opposite of California is fucking Toronto. You know what I mean?
I don't think Toronto's the opposite of California.
You don't think Toronto's the opposite of California?
No, Toronto's a huge...
Really? Because 365 days you can walk around in a t-shirt next to the ocean, and over here you got dirty Lake Ontario where if you go in there one day, you may come up with the third leg. I think that makes a huge difference. And Toronto's a beautiful place, and I personally love Toronto. Like, I love going down to Toronto, walking around, and the culture and the food. Like, I
look, you could end up in Detroit, which is just as cold, and
Detroit's
it's a garbage city.
Detroit's awful, but
Toronto's a great city. Toronto's a great city to live in. Like, there's way worse places to be than Toronto.
I agree, but we're talking about. I'm saying NBA superstars don't want to come here. They don't.
You're looking very short future. You are not thinking about that. We're talking about 6 years. We're talking about the year 2080.
What's the best way to improve your team in the offseason? What do you do?
Free agents.
Okay. If none of those top quality free agents want to sign with you,
you don't think,
and they sign with other teams and create super teams every single summer, you're going to be in a place where you're not as good as the other teams.
Toronto's market's growing.
You can't compete.
MLSE is one of the wealthiest.
It doesn't matter for that.
It doesn't. They have the money to pay these.
It
players.
does not. That's not what
the
matters.
market is going to is growing, and it's going to reach a point at some point in the next 10 years to 20 years where there's going to be an attraction to free agents. Somewhere in the next 10 to 20 years, there's going to be an attraction to free agents in Toronto in the NBA. Like we're seeing right now that Toronto's becoming a lot more popular in the NBA, especially given that they won the NBA championship. In the next 10 to 20 years, it's going to be a great market for players to play in because of the amount of money that we can offer them through MLSE, because it's a great city, because they've won an NBA championship, which is huge. Anybody who plays in Toronto says they love it in Toronto. There's like never really any players who don't like it in Toronto for the city. Like, the only negative things about Toronto are the media, but that's more on the hockey side. The basketball media is still relatively up and coming because basketball is so new to Canada. Like when basketball got introduced in Canada 25 years ago with the pro team, it was really hard to market. But at this point, we are way beyond that. Basketball is immensely popular in Canada. Basketball is going to be a top 3 sport in Canada, if not already, along with hockey and soccer. There's no way you can tell me differently. It could arguably surpass one of those two at some point. But I don't see that. But basketball is going to be a huge sport in Canada. I can't believe you don't think that the market in 60 years is ever going to grow to a point for Toronto basketball that a marquee free agent is going to sign in Toronto.
I think...
Why do you think that nowhere in the next 60 years that's going to happen?
Because there's just better places to play. Like, you're the best players of basketball, even though it was invented in Canada, and yeah, the game's growing here. The best players, and they will always be the best players, are going to be Americans. Like, Americans are just going to be the lottery picks. They're going to be the franchise players.
Why can't we get an American player at any point?
Okay, but listen to me. So, when it comes to that, like, the only way that we're going to be successful is if we draft players, and the best way to build your team, and like, yeah, drafting's good, but we drafted, arguably, our franchise best player, and he still was not good enough to win. I'm talking about DeMar DeRozan. He still was not good enough to win. Do you understand? The best player, he stayed with us 9 years. Vince Carter, if you want to say,
DeMar DeRozan was a top shooting guard in the NBA in his time, but his game has not grown with the NBA. I'm not gonna talk about DeMar DeRozan.
But we're talking. But that's what I'm talking about. So do you think Toronto would have been better if they had the ability to go and get a marquee free agent?
Obviously. Any team's better than get a marquee free agent.
But Toronto didn't have that ability, and instead they just stick with.
They
stick with what they had, and what they had was a guy who's a very good player, but couldn't elevate him to the point where they had to win an NBA championship.
The sample size here is very small. You're talking about a very small sample.
They made the playoffs for like 5-6 straight years and did absolutely nothing besides struggle at every single round, and 1 year flukishly get by Indiana and Miami and somehow make it to the conference finals, where realistically they had no business.
You're talking about
they had no business in 2016 going 6 games with the Cavaliers, because that team was just obviously way better. They won the championship that year. But when it comes down
6 years is a very small sample size, by the way. You're talking about a very small sample size.
These superstars go to these teams for 3-4 years and win championships. What do you mean? Durant was on the Warriors, and what they do? They won. LeBron went to the Cavs. What they do? They won. LeBron went to Miami. What they do? They won. He wasn't there for 6 years. None of those players were on those rosters. All the teams that have won NBA championships, their finals MVP was on their roster less than 6 years. I don't know what you're talking about. Kawhi Leonard was here for 1 year, finals MVP. It's just how it happens. In basketball, it's literally your team can go from a lottery team to a contender really quickly, and I don't think the Raptors have the base or the attraction of free agents to surpass that. I don't think it will ever grow to a point where
you think
American superstars want to come here and play.
You think you have a superstar, then you can win an NBA championship, right? So you think that 6 years with DeMar DeRozan is enough of a sample size to deem they have to have won an NBA championship with this guy?
I'm saying we have had guys that we've drafted that we've labeled superstars, top talent in the league, and they have not been able to win because we haven't been able to surround them with the pieces because players don't want to come and play here. Vince Carter, the same thing. 7 years. Couldn't surround him with anything. Chris Bosh couldn't surround him with garbage the whole time he was here. And what do they do?
So stuck in the past.
I'm saying, what do? They leave, and that's just that. You think that's gonna change? How is that gonna change? Why would that change?
Far in the past. You're talking about stuff that happened 15 plus years ago.
Why would that change?
Why would that change? Because basketball in Canada is getting more popular. Basketball in Toronto is getting more popular. The market in Toronto is getting more popular. Just because you have stars doesn't mean you're going to win. The Utah Jazz had John Stockton, Karl Malone. John Stockton is one of the best point guards of all time. Karl Malone is second all time in the NBA for scoring. They had them for almost 2 decades and didn't win an NBA shit.
Exactly.
So just because you have a star doesn't necessarily
mean
you're going to win.
But you're literally proving a point. They had 2 of the best players ever to touch the court in the NBA, and they still didn't win. So you're telling me right now the Raptors don't have that ability to have 2 of the best players in the NBA on their team, and therefore will never have the opportunity again to go and win a championship. They'll never have a free agency where they can go sign a Kyrie and a Durant. They can go sign a Kawhi and PG. They'll never have a summer like that ever in franchise history because this is not a market that two free agents would ever play in.
You don't think we could have attracted Kawhi and PG?
We would have had to trade our entire team just to keep a guy that we already had.
So we would have re-signed Kawhi and we would have had Paul George if they went through with the trade to OKC.
Exactly.
But Ujiri didn't want to trade Pascal Siakam. So we could very well be looking at a Toronto team that has PG and Kawhi at this point in the season.
Does that count? Would you count that as a free agent? That's a free agent literally manhandling your team to get his buddy on the team so he could stay there. And then
so you're talking about LA being a big market. That's exactly what LA did.
How?
Kawhi used them to get PG on the team with them. That's how they got Kawhi in the first place.
Yeah, but Kawhi wanted to go there. That was
Kawhi wanted to stay in Toronto as well.
Kawhi's an LA dude. He wanted to play in LA.
So if the Raptors trade for PG, Kawhi goes to LA because he wants to play there more.
When Kawhi was on San Antonio and he was like, these guys are, saying all this shit about my injury, where did he say he wanted to play? He didn't say he wanted to play in Toronto.
He wanted to play in LA.
He did not say he wanted to play in Toronto.
So,
he said he wanted to play in LA. When these guys all come out, where do they all want to play? Where do they all want to play? They all want to play in LA. They all want to play in Chicago. They all want to play in New York. They don't want to play here, man.
Again, you're very close-minded. You're not looking into the future. You're looking into a future that has there's no steps to prove your points. Every guy that gets traded Toronto
here
10 years ago compared to where they are now. Look at the market. Look at Canadian basketball from 10 years ago to now. Canadian basketball 10 years ago had no talent. Canadian basketball right now is promising. There's some talented players on there. There's a potential MIP candidate. There's Jamal Murray's on a max contract. There's a potential future NBA star, RJ Barrett. There are good Canadian players in the NBA. Look, 10 years ago, could you find good NBA players? No. 10 years ago, Toronto didn't have a single first overall draft selection. At this point in time, we have two. I know one of them is the worst first overall pick in NBA history. But look at the movements that have been made in Toronto and Canada over the last 10 years. So imagine in 10 years, that it's an exponential increase. The jump in the next decade is going to be even bigger than the jump we had this decade. You're looking solely on the past of Canadian basketball and Toronto basketball. You're not looking into the future of Canadian basketball. You're just saying, oh, Vince Carter left. Chris Bosh left. We didn't give them good enough teams. They couldn't succeed. DeMar DeRozan we had to trade because he couldn't succeed in Toronto. You're only looking at the past. You're not looking at what the future can hold for Toronto. And 60 years is such a long amount of time. You've only been alive for just over 20 years. So you've only lived a quarter of the potential of Canadian and Toronto basketball. I did an interview with John Bitov, the founder of the Toronto Raptors, who you could say is definitely quite savvy marketing-wise. He founded the Toronto Raptors and was their owner for a period of time. He said in the interview with me that Toronto is going to be a market that surpasses LA, New York, Chicago.
Will never happen.
I don't necessarily agree with this state, but can you not see how that could happen? Toronto is the only team in Canada. Toronto is a worldwide market. There are Toronto fans everywhere in the world.
There's NBA fans everywhere in the world.
And there are Toronto fans everywhere in the world. Toronto's a big market. Do you think that the Charlotte Hornets have worldwide fans to the degree of the Toronto Raptors? Like, Toronto is a humongous market in the world.
Oh my goodness.
How do you not see this market growing continuously over the next 60 years?
The thing is, and what the question is do the Toronto Raptors win a championship in the next 60 years? You're basing it off the fact that they may have the potential to actually, obviously have better players come through and, maybe sign a Canadian superstar and win a championship. That's what you're basing off of. I'm saying, because of what we have seen in the NBA, not only will that not happen, but the Raptors will struggle because there will always be a team that will be better or attract that free agent attract that superstar.
Does the best team win the NBA championship every year? The best collective of players win the NBA championship every year?
Yes, for the most part.
You just said
that
last year.
What do you think yes for the most part means?
Okay,
I didn't say yes every single season.
Cleveland
best team wins.
Cleveland 2016. That was not the best team in the NBA. The best team in the NBA did not win that year. Last year, the Raptors
blew it.
Last year, the Raptors were not the best team in the NBA. They won the NBA championship. You could look at in the 2000s, the Mavericks. You could look at the Pistons. The Pistons were not the best team in the NBA. They won an NBA championship.
They're the best defensive team.
The Miami Heat, when they won in 2006, they were not the best team in the NBA as a collective of players. You just need to be a competitive team. Any team that is up in the conferences, like top 4 in the conferences, can win an NBA championship. I know there's going to be some powerhouse, but you can take down a powerhouse in a 7-game series. I mean, I just proved it. Like the Miami Heat with LeBron James, one of the best teams of all time. The Dallas Mavericks with an aging Jason Kidd and Dirk Nowitzki beat those guys.
But those are Dirk Nowitzki was a superstar player. Mm-hmm. Okay, superstar player. You need superstar players.
And there's going to be superstar players.
Talent.
There's going to be
I don't think
Toronto
has the ability to get those players. And if they do, I just don't see them beating those teams. Like that 2000...
They have had these superstar players.
That 2011 run by the Mavericks was ridiculous what he was doing because he was beating all these superstar teams.
So this can happen. That's 60 years for it to happen.
That's not going to happen. I'm telling you, I'm sorry, bro, it's just not going to happen. It's for us just to win this one championship and get this one grimace of light, like everything had to go right for us. And for everything to go right again, I just don't see it happening.
Look, I'm not saying we're going to win every 5-10 years. Like, it might be another 20 years, might be another 30 years, might be 50 years. There's 60 years of time to work with this.
I'm saying the way the NBA is, these players, your team can go from 0 to hero back to 0 in a matter of 4 seasons. Okay? That's just how the NBA is. These guys don't really stick around. They leave, they come, whatever. I just don't see the Raptors being able to attract a free agent that puts them over the top to the point where they go and win a championship. I think they could be very competitive. Okay. I think they'd be very good. I just don't see them winning an NBA championship. And that's really what it is in the next 60 years. And I think that they will have really good players, but they're not going to win. It's just...
Okay. 15 years ago, would a marquee superstar who's playing for the Raptors, like Vince Carter, Chris Bosh, stay with the Raptors? Would they do that? No. Would a superstar 3 years ago stay with the Raptors when his contract expires?
Only DeMar DeRozan.
DeMar DeRozan did.
Okay, but Kawhi Leonard did not.
Kawhi Leonard would have if we had traded for Paul
That's
George.
not what...
No matter who...
Kawhi Leonard did not.
Okay.
We had a good enough team. Kawhi Leonard was on a championship team and literally said, yo, this team... still needs this team.
So Kevin Durant,
Kawhi Leonard, Kawhi Leonard literally realized, yo, like I had to drag these guys just for them to have the ability to win this. I need help. Toronto didn't get him that help, so he left.
So he's not gonna have to drag the Clippers if they want to win an NBA championship. They don't need him.
No. They have Paul George. They have Montrezl Harrell.
So no Kawhi. That team is an NBA championship caliber team.
Yes.
Oh my. Dude,
you're on crack.
Lying. Now you're lying.
You're on crack. You don't think the Clippers are a very, very good basketball team if they don't have Kawhi Leonard?
I do.
They were the 8th seed and took the Warriors to 6 games last year.
Yeah, now they have Kawhi Leonard.
And
they were an 8th seed last year.
They were an 8th seed, and then they add Paul George.
Okay, they become competitive in the West. They become a Utah Jazz level team.
No, you're on crack. I can't believe what you're saying to me right now.
Look,
you're telling me the Clippers without Kawhi Leonard are not a good team.
I never said they're not.
You said they become the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz are never going to sniff a championship. The
Utah Jazz a bad team?
The Utah Jazz are going to be what the Raptors are going to be. They're going to be an in-between team between 5, maybe 4 1 year, but 5 to 8 every single year
for the next 60 years.
Because the other teams will be more competitive and have the ability to attract free agents. Utah doesn't have the ability to attract free agents. They don't.
Toronto's a much bigger market than the Utah Jazz.
But I'm saying they don't have that ability. The same way Toronto does not have that ability.
You're saying you're putting Toronto's market on Utah's market.
Kawhi literally won a championship here and still left. I don't think you understand that. The guy won a championship.
Would Kawhi have gone to the Clippers if they didn't trade for Paul George?
Where would Kawhi have gone if they didn't trade for Paul George?
Maybe Toronto.
You think that
maybe the Lakers?
You think Kawhi signs? They play in the same building. Oh my God, the Clippers and the Lakers. That doesn't matter. Okay, he would not have came here. He would have gone to LA to play.
Man, he's been saying he almost signed with the Raptors. He was considering signing with the Raptors.
Almost signed, but he didn't.
Because the Clippers traded for Paul George. They rinsed their future to trade for Kawhi Leonard. The Raptors don't want to rinse the future to get Kawhi Leonard.
The Raptors aren't going to have a future.
The Raptors don't have a future.
The Raptors are not winning a championship in 60
years.
years.
So you're telling
they're not going to
draft well. The Raptors don't create better players.
When you have to draft,
market isn't growing.
When you have to draft between 14 and 20 every single year, you're not gonna get a lot of opportunity to draft NBA superstars. Toronto last year got very lucky because no one was a lottery pick, I believe, on the team. Everyone was drafted between...
Exactly! They can draft good players.
But they had superstars, and they got very lucky. There were a lot of times where that exact Toronto team, that situation that they had, wouldn't have worked. That's what I'm saying. For that to be a variable and happen, it's just... It's not there next year.
The Boston Bruins in the NHL are not lucky that they draft well because
NHL and NBA are not comparable. The NHL has 7 rounds of drafting. The NBA has 2. you get 2 to 3, maybe 4 players every single June to add to your roster if you do not sign a free agent, and that's it.
Can I make my point? The Boston Bruins are not lucky that they don't have any players drafted in the top 10. They just create good teams, and I know Boston's a good market. But Toronto are not lucky because they draft well later. They're not lucky. That's from scouting. That's from continuous scouting. That's from picking the best players to fit your system. Do you think anybody was thinking Pascal Siakam would be this good? No, but then why did the Raptors draft him that high? Like, guys like Terrence Davis went undrafted, and he's been playing. He's obviously not a superstar, but the scouting is there. They don't have any players drafted top. Even Kawhi Leonard wasn't drafted that high.
I know.
You can get good players that low if the scouting is right, and the scouting is there, and you can develop these players, which the Raps are proving they can develop these sorts of players. Fred VanVleet was undrafted. You and me think he's going to be an all-star this season. You don't have to build just the draft. You build through a good front office, and we have a great executive in Masai Ujiri.
You think Masai is going to be here in 60 years?
Obviously not.
Okay, so?
You don't think it's ever going to be another... That's it. This is the
Bro, Masai
plateau.
might not even be here in 3 years. I think that this is where...
You're looking so fucking close-minded on
this. I think this is
unbelievable.
where...
You're looking 5 years in the future and thinking that the next 5 years are going to dictate the next 60 years and the next 55 years after that 5 years. You're not looking at the possibilities for the growth of this market to attract superstars and to build a team again.
Out of 30 teams, how many win an NBA championship?
1.
Okay, so 1 out of 30 teams. You're telling me the Raptors are going to be the best team in the NBA in X amount of years? I just don't see it happening.
I think
because the variables are not in our future.
Because there's at least 25 teams that don't have the marketability of the Toronto Raptors. There's at least 25. The LA teams have a better market, and the Clippers are just now getting that market to be better than the Raptors because Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are there. Both LA teams, you could say the Knicks, who are still god-awful. That's about it. Maybe Chicago as well. Those are the 4.
That's crazy.
Toronto's in the top 5 for a market.
You're on crack.
This is one team for an entire country. Name 5 teams with a better market than Toronto.
Okay, I'll just tell you. The Miami Heat, okay? The Lakers, the Clippers, the Warriors, the Chicago Bulls, all better markets than Toronto.
How many teams is that? 5?
Yes.
So, okay, they're 1 off on your prediction, and the Miami Heat
what I'm saying is I'm talking about NBA superstars, the way to attract them. So how many NBA
The only reason LeBron ended up in Miami is because Dwayne Wade was there.
And Chris Bosh signed there.
Because
But what? But how did they get 2 NBA superstars in one offseason?
Because they drafted Dwayne Wade. Dwayne Wade had a good relationship with them. They wanted to play with Dwayne Wade.
They got 2 NBA superstars in one offseason. They got Jimmy Butler. Look what Jimmy Butler's done to their team. That's just what happens in the league. These players go to better teams where they want to play.
You're saying Toronto is a top 6 market in the NBA. That's what you just said to me.
You
just said they're top 6 market in the NBA.
No. How many NBA superstars are free agents every year? I'll tell you the free agent class this year. I'll tell you.
Okay, you're using an off year for free agents. I could use.
I'll use next year. Next year has all the superstars. LeBron is a free agent. Kawhi Leonard can possibly be a free agent. Giannis is a free agent. Paul George is a free agent. Blake Griffin's a free agent. Bradley Beal's a free agent. Oladipo's a free agent. Gobert's a free agent. DeRozan, McCollum, Randall, Tatum, De'Aaron Fox, and Donovan Mitchell. I'll leave it there. Which one of those guys signs with the Raptors?
First of all, you're operating under the assumption that none of these guys will extend their contracts beyond that UFA because at least half of those guys are not going to be free agents at that point. At least half of those guys are not going to be free agents in 2 years. So you're going in a smaller player pool. In 2 years, the Raptors may not have a ton of cap space to be able to get these guys. And once again, you are looking so shortly into the future.
I'm looking 2 years into the future after we won a championship.
What
you're talking about our marketability going up and us being able to attract these guys 2 years after you win a championship. How can you not attract free agents? How?
cap space. The market still has not reached its max potential. Those are two very good takes on that. The market is going to be. Look. You're looking at. Looking at 2 years.
1 second.
If the Raptors don't win in the next 2
second.
years, they won't win for another 60 years. That's what you're trying to prove to me.
Okay, you just said we just trashed on Utah. You said Toronto is a better market than them.
Yeah.
Why can't you get Rudy Gobert?
They could,
but they won't.
Why not?
You don't think they will? You know that they won't get Rudy Gobert.
Probably not.
Okay.
He's already on Utah. You're using Kawhi Leonard.
But if he can go to a better
example.
place, he can go to a better place. All these players want to go to better place.
Utah has a better team than Toronto right now. Utah have a better chance of winning an NBA championship this season than Toronto do. They just have a better team.
You're absolutely correct. You didn't see them 40-piece Utah at the half like 3 weeks ago?
You think Toronto have a better roster?
I think Toronto has a way better roster than the Utah Jazz do.
Dude, come on.
Come on, buddy.
Donovan Mitchell.
No, you're joking.
Mike
Toronto's
Conley,
deeper.
Rudy Gobert.
Toronto has better shooting. Come on, man. Our big play, bro. Come on, man. You're not serious. I know you're not. I know you're joking with me. You're fucking with me right now. No, you're fucking with me right now.
Utah the better team. Look,
Utah's not better than us.
Considered one of the best teams in the West coming into this season.
Not by me.
I
test basketball.
I had them finishing 5th or 6th in the West. I have Toronto finishing 5th or 6th in the West. The West is way better than the East.
I don't know, like,
look,
man.
This is irrelevant. You're looking at 5 years. You're not picturing.
I'm asking.
You're like 20 years into the future, 30 years into the future. We're talking about guys who are in grade school. We're talking about guys who aren't even born yet, as a potential for the future.
I'm asking you, who is able to turn the franchise around, and I just don't think that they can get that player in free agency. They have to draft them.
Ever. You don't think ever.
I think that if we did the Amateur Hour podcast in 2080, whoever's listening to that would know I called it 60 years prior. The Raptors don't sign Jack. They don't get anybody. And I'm telling you, when that day comes in 2080, I want to check. If you're alive, I want to check.
I think in the next 10 to 20 years, the Raptors will land a huge summer free agent.
Do you think in the next 20 years, the Raptors win a championship? Because it took them 25 to barely win one.
I don't think they win in the next 20 years. Probably not. I don't think they win in the next 20 years.
Okay. Let me tell you something.
That's 33% of the time that they have to win it.
Let me tell you something. Teams can go on historically long runs without winning, and in Toronto it happens because we don't attract American players to come play for our team. The Blue Jays, it's happened to them. The Leafs, even being the Mecca, whatever, 49. I think it's 51 years actually. It's like 52, 53 years almost. 52, 53 years sounds pretty close to 60 if you ask me.
Do you think the Leafs will win in the next 5 years?
I think the Leafs personally have the best chance that they've had
in the next 5 years.
In the next 5 years.
So that will be how many years since they won a cup?
58 years.
Which is less than
60 years. But look what they had to do. They signed John Tavares, a marquee free agent. They drafted not one, but 2 superstars in William Nylander and Mitch Marner and Morgan Riley. So let's say 3 superstars, perennial all-star type players.
Morgan Riley's not a superstar. I love Morgan
Riley.
But you can't come and talk to me about guys not being superstars and then come tell me Morgan Riley is a superstar.
Morgan Riley put up 70 points from...
That is an off year. Look at him this season.
72 points from... And he was a Norris candidate as well.
He wasn't a finalist.
He was like number 4, number 5 on the list. That's a superstar.
One off year.
He's one of the best 5 defensemen in the whole league, where you have 6 starting defensemen on 31 teams. So yes, that is a
Just
superstar.
finish your point.
That's a superstar.
That's not what we're arguing. Finish your point.
What I'm saying is that all has to come together for them just to have a chance.
And you don't think that can all come together in 60 years?
The majority of the people listening to this podcast will tell you the Leafs probably don't look like they'll win a cup. They probably
You
will not.
think they're gonna win a cup?
I think that they'll win a cup because I pray they win a cup because I'm a fan. But if
you don't think the Raptors are gonna win in 60 years? You think the Leafs in 5 years? Sure, the Raptors in 60 years.
The Leafs,
no chance.
The Leafs,
not a fucking chance.
The Leafs are. It's apples to oranges. But I just think those two teams, what you're looking at, and it kind of proves my point because I'm saying, Raptors can't attract anyone. You have to be able to draft superstars, and if you can't draft those superstars, what do you do?
They drafted a superstar within the last 5 years. They got Pascal Siakam. He was a top 5 MVP candidate until he got injured.
You think Pascal Siakam wins the Raptors a championship because you just said they don't win in 20 years?
I think that, you know what, if they get a superstar, if they land a superstar, then yeah, I think Pascal Siakam. If he got another superstar with him, I think Pascal Siakam is good enough.
How would they get that superstar, Jacob? They'd have to trade him.
They could trade, or if they get one in free agency.
They're not gonna get. Listen, you know what?
I don't agree with you though.
They're not gonna get a superstar in free agency. They have to trade. Every good player who's ever come here and been successful has been traded here. It's just how it is. That's just how it. Kawhi Leonard.
So why can't you be successful through trade? Why can't you be successful through draft? I can think of. Look at the Mavericks.
But I'm saying
they're successful through trading and they're successful through the draft.
But we were only successful because of the factors that happened for us. We should not have won the NBA championship this year. And you know that.
I know that. I for sure know that.
Okay, so in all of that, in all these trades, and all the little Marc Gasol for Jonas Valanciunas and Kawhi Leonard and for all these little trades that happened, and we still barely won.
That's what I'm saying. That these from now until the next 60 years, right now, today, this is the smallest the Toronto Raptors basketball market is going to be for the next 60 years because it's growing every single day and it's going to continue to grow for the next 60 years. This is the smallest it's ever going to be again today. It's going to keep getting bigger. We won in a smaller market, and now we're going to be creating a bigger market of basketball, which is going to transcend into an eventual NBA championship at some point in the next 60 years. Could be 50 years. Could be 55 years. It's going to happen.
I disagree. I'm not going to kind of keep yelling about it, but I definitely disagree. I think...
really think 60 years down
I think
the road,
we're going to plateau, man. I think you got a lot of different... there's a lot of variables. You have a first-year head coach who tried everything, was really creative, did a good job. You have, Masai. And Masai, we trust the God, who built the team for us, and... inability to draft or, acquire through free agency for a superstar is what...
Inability to draft. You don't think they draft well?
No, they draft well. You
just said the inability
to draft a superstar. Pascal
Siakam... They drafted one 4 years ago.
Pascal Siakam is now looking like a superstar. I absolutely agree.
My God.
But I don't think the team ever wins with Pascal Siakam as their best player.
Man, he's a top 5 player in the league until he gets injured. There are a lot of players who are not as good as Pascal Siakam.
Top 5 in MVP is not a top 5 player in the league, and you know that because LeBron is the best player in the league, and does he win MVP every single year?
No.
Okay, so retract that point right now because that's foolishness.
Not retracting that point.
Foolishness to say he's he's a top 5 player in the league. Are you? No.
Kawhi won Finals MVP last year. Am I right?
Correct.
Is Kawhi the best player in the league?
No.
But he won Finals MVP. Who won MVP last year? Giannis won MVP. Is he the best player in the NBA?
Arguably.
You just said LeBron's the best player in the NBA.
That's what arguably means. You can argue for either guy to be the best player in the NBA. That's literally what arguably means.
So when a lot of people were considering Pascal Siakam to be an MVP caliber player, he's better than a lot of guys because very select few are in that conversation as an MVP caliber player. Oh. And Pascal Siakam put himself in that discussion.
Oh man, put himself in the discussion. It doesn't. You're talking. You're telling me. Let's just take the All-Star pool for example. Pascal Siakam is the 5th guy that you pick to build your team around in the league. Look me in my face and say that.
Probably not. You got younger guys to build around.
Not if I'm saying you get their careers and what you think their careers possibly could be, and I'll look you. You cannot look me in my face and say, "Oh, I will take Pascal Siakam over Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Giannis, LeBron,
No, I wouldn't.
AD, Luka Doncic, Kristaps Porzingis." Like I
take him over Kristaps Porzingis.
It's Kyrie Irving. Like it's just not gonna happen. Damian Lillard. Like there's just so many good guys, and maybe they don't.
You're not arguing on point.
Maybe they don't put themselves in the MVP conversation, but sometimes that's just
you're not arguing
what
the point.
happens
You're not
that
arguing
year.
The point. You're just yelling about nonsense.
MVP is just that year.
This isn't the point. Pascal Siakam is good enough to be on a team that wins an NBA championship as the best player. Chauncey Billups wasn't even a star in the NBA, and the Detroit Pistons won an NBA championship.
They won on being the best defensive team ever.
So you don't think a Raptors team can do that?
You think the Raptors can be the best defensive team ever?
Probably not, but they can
They
can be the best defensive team in the NBA.
That's different. That defense was it 2004 that they won, where they beat the Lakers, I believe? That defense was based on twos. This defense is based on threes, and anyone can pull it from anywhere and come off the screen. The league is different.
The league's changing.
Exactly. So you need to shoot the ball and score more than the other team, not defend really well and then, capitalize when you have to, like how Detroit played.
You think Toronto's a better offensive team than Golden State last year?
No.
They won on defense.
Golden State was hurt. I really hope the Raptors can beat them when the Raptors had their whole lineup and Quinn Cook was coming off the bench and playing 25 minutes. Like, I really hope that they can beat them. I hope DeMarcus Cousins can Kevon Looney's ugly ass. I hope they're able to beat them because those guys are...
A lot of teams didn't, though. Are Toronto better than Houston?
I don't know what's wrong with Houston. I don't want to say anything about Houston, but Houston comes into Toronto and beats us. We go to Houston and Houston beats us. So when it comes to Houston, we don't beat them. So it's hard to say that we're better than them.
That Golden State team beat Houston.
But that's what happens in the playoffs, and that's not happening for Toronto.
What?
That's what happens in the playoffs, but that's not going to happen for Toronto. Like that, it's one of those things where it's hard to talk about, but you're not going to have a situation where you have it like last playoffs. It's just not going to happen. And I think you know that.
Never again.
Never again. It's 60 years. Never again will happen. I think you know that. And I think it sucks. It sucks to hear obviously, because you want to see them win and do well, but they're just not going to be at a place where they're able to win an NBA championship with the talent that is in the league and goes to different teams. Like, Toronto will never have an offseason where they can get one superstar, let alone two superstars, to put themselves at, contenders. And think how many times Toronto finished with the number 1 and number 2 seed. With DeMar DeRozan as their best player, and where'd we go? Second round, first. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things where Toronto just they're not good enough. They're not good. Like their teams just aren't gonna be good enough to get it done, and they never will.
Okay, I'm done yelling. So, I think that the market in Toronto is going to grow every single day to the point where they are able to attract superstars. I think Canadian basketball is going to grow to a point where Canadian players are going to want to play in Toronto, and Toronto's going to be able to attract them in free agency. Even if they aren't Canadian, I still think they'll be able to attract American free agents based on the marketing that they are going to create over the next 6 decades. And at some point, they will be good enough over those 6 decades to win an NBA championship. But that wraps up this episode. I really want to know the opinions of anybody else listening to this podcast. So if you are still around, comment or let us know on Twitter or Instagram at AmateurPDC. Comment on YouTube what you think. You can just message one of us and follow on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube. We post every single day. Keep coming back for more daily content. We'll see you again tomorrow for another episode.